That's how we figure out who has emotional intelligence, is the people who pay attention to us, who show that they're listening to us, who match us. They're the ones who understand us and want to hear what we have to say.
All right, let's kick off today's show. We have guest Charles Duhigg back, New Yorker, writer, and author of Supercommunicators, today to talk about why some people make every conversation better, not through charisma or extroversion, but through specific learnable skills. And after listening, you're going to understand how to become a high centrality person who makes it easier for others to speak up and have concrete tools to navigate even your toughest conversations. Charles shares why asking beats telling in tough conversations, how looping for understanding diffuses workplace tensions, the real reason we laugh, hint, it's not humor, and why callbacks determine speed dating success. Welcome to the show, Charles. It's great to have you back.
Thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had so much fun talking about your book, Supercommunicators, and it's so packed with science that we had to have you back on to share some more.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it.
One of the more fascinating parts of the research in the book that I thought really stood out was this idea of high centrality people. And I'm curious if you can talk about what that actually means from a scientific perspective.
There's this guy, Bo Sivers, who did this experiment. He's based out of Dartmouth. And it's really interesting. What he did is he put teams of people together. And these are folks who don't know each other, they're strangers, and he'd have them watch these movie clips together. And the movie clips were super confusing. It was like, 2 or 3 minutes from the middle of a movie. Some of them were foreign films. To make it even more confusing, he cut all of the subtitles and the sound. So all you saw were these people like either arguing with each other or looking at each other across the room. And then he said, okay, look, fill out a survey just telling me what you think is happening in each movie scene. And people would fill that out. And then he'd put them in a room and he'd say, okay, now go ahead and answer these questions together. Like go through as a team and say what you think is happening in each scene. And what he found that some people or some teams, when they did this, it was as if something magical happened, right? Like as if everyone started listening to each other and they were all kind of getting really gelled on exactly how they think about this stuff. Their answers were much more specific and much, much more correct. Something happened in those rooms where everyone felt like they could speak up. And that didn't happen on every single team, only on some of the teams. And so he looked closely, and what he found was that on those teams, there was always at least one person who they refer to as a high centrality participant, someone who makes it easier for other people to speak up. Somebody who helps the group come to consensus. Somebody who helps people feel like they're having fun and that they're being listened to and come up with new ideas. These folks were super communicators. And what we know is that what they were doing it's not that they were more gregarious or more outgoing or more charismatic. It's that they literally just knew how to use the skills of communication better. And that made them much more influential and made their groups gel much better.
It's so counterintuitive to the view that we have of leadership, where you think of a leader as being bold and speaking up in those moments and rallying people around them. But it's actually almost the opposite effect here, allowing others to speak up.
That's exactly right. And if you think about it, the best teams you've been on are probably teams where you felt like you were pretty smart, right? Everyone else is smart, but you're also pretty smart. The worst teams are when there's like one genius and like everyone basically is just supposed to sit there and listen to them. Or when there's a leader who's like, this is what you're going to do and we're going to do X and Y and Z. Teams feel good. Conversations feel good when we feel like we're participating, when we feel as smart as the conversation feels. And super communicators are really good at doing that. They're really good at asking the right questions. They're really good at proving to you that they're listening. They're really good at drawing you out in these really meaningful ways.
Oh, I know when we first had you on, the response was, well, I'm a good communicator already. I think everyone sort of overrates themselves on how great of communicators they are. And a lot of these traits that we ascribe to being great communicators actually aren't how you define super communicators. So that gregarious, charismatic, stands out in a crowd actually doesn't make you a super communicator.
No, and some super communicators are, right? And the truth is that we're all super communicators at one time or another, right? We all walk into a meeting and we know exactly what to say to get everyone on our side. Or we have a friend who comes to us with a problem and we know they're not looking for us to solve their problem. They just want to like have us listen and empathize. If you think about it, and I think I mentioned this last time we were talking, communication is Homo sapiens' superpower, right? Communication is the reason our species has succeeded so well. And so our brains have evolved to be really good at communication. And you're right. Oftentimes people think they're a super communicator because they are. They know exactly what to say. The difference is that there are some people who can do this consistently. They can talk to anyone the same way they talk to their best friend. They always know the right thing to say. And it's not because they were born with the gift of gab. It's not because they're extroverts. It's because they just learned a handful of skills and they see them as skills that you can practice and use anywhere you want. The same way that once you learn to read, you could read a novel or a menu, right? It's just an interchangeable skill that we have to practice until it becomes a habit.
Communication can be used for high intention. And if it's going to be high intention communication, well, then there are going to be skills that you need to sharpen that allow you to get to the goals of the conversation. And for most people, they don't think of it that way, right? In fact, when I create content around this, of course, I get tons of people who go, oh, that is so amazing. I want to be a high intention communicator, or I want to learn these skills. I want to be better. And then the other half is, why can't people just hang out and talk without any agenda going on? Well, it's like that. Everything that you do, there are going to be people who just go with the flow and whatever happens, happens. And those are passive communicators. And there's going to be people who are highly intentioned, who want to get things out of it. They want to be a leader. They want to be a motivator. They want to be a connector. There's a specific communication that needs to happen in order for those goals to be met.
I would also say that the folks who say, like, just go with the flow, they also have intentions, right? They
Sure.
like if I tell you a joke, if we're just hanging out and watch TV and I tell you a joke, I'm trying to make you laugh. Now, my intention might not be forefront of my mind. It might not be something that's really ambitious. It might be just like, hey, I want to hear what's up with Johnny and AJ and like hang out with them and just like feel like we're buds, right? But that's the point, is that
that's
we
attention.
always have, that's intention. We always have a motivation when we open up our mouth, whether we're aware of it or not. And the more that we understand how to recognize that intention and how to take advantage of the skills that gets us what we're hoping to get from this conversation, the more successful we are.
And
Absolutely.
that laughter piece, it's not just about laughing and sheer laughter. It's actually about connection. And we've all been on the receiving end of a joke that doesn't land, and you're trying to connect with people and they don't see the joke or they don't care for that type of humor. But we're not trying to be comedians in our communication. We're not trying to do it from a stage. We're just trying to connect with others as humans to feel connected to one another.
There was this researcher at the University of Maryland who, for over a year, he would like ride buses and sit in shopping malls and just eavesdrop on people's conversations. And he actually recorded a number of them. And one of the things he did is he counted how many times people laughed. And we sort of assumed that laughter is something that happens when we hear something funny. But he found that 80% of the time when people laughed, it had nothing to do with anyone saying something funny, right? Like there was no joke that was attempted. There was no humor. The reason we laugh is it's a social response. We laugh to show someone that we want to connect with them. And when they laugh back, this social reciprocity, the most natural thing on earth, when they laugh back, they're showing that they want to connect with us as well. Laughter sometimes happens when we see something funny, but most of the time it happens when we want to feel good and we want someone else to feel good and we want to connect with them.
Oftentimes in professional settings, we try to avoid that. We try to present ourselves in a way that's, very on point and no humor, avoid laughter. But that actually breaking of the tension through that laughter creates the space for us to actually connect to the presentation, to connect what you're sharing, to actually invest in what's going on in that room.
Sometimes we say like, oh, I have a work brain and I have a non-work brain, like a home brain. But the truth of the matter is, some of the most important stuff that we do is at work, right? We are as alive at work as we are at home. And in fact, if you spend 8 to 10 hours a day at your work, you should be alive. It's a huge portion of your life. And the same communication skills, the same ability to connect with other people, they exist at work as much as they do at home. In fact, there's some really interesting studies that look at why people quit their jobs. And they found that the number one reason is not getting a higher paycheck. It's not having more flexibility. People quit their jobs when they don't have a friend at work and they stay in their jobs, even if that job is paying them less than alternatives, if they have friends at work. So forming friendships at work, connecting with people at work, it's one of the most powerful, important things we can do.
Yeah, and it's a shame so many of us avoid it. Like we're like, oh, those are my coworkers. Like I can't show that side of myself. I can't talk about what I'm passionate about or what I did over the weekend because they just want to hear what's going on in the Zoom. What I'm curious about, it's not very often we have an author back on after the book has come out. And when we had you on the very first time, we talked about habits, the power of habit, and how well read that book is and how many people quote it. What's been the response to Supercommunicators and what's really stood out to you?
It's been great. It's been great. I mean, it was on the bestseller list for I think over 40 weeks, which was fantastic. And I feel really lucky. But what's been even more powerful is just hearing from people, right? There's been a lot of people who write in who said like, I've been estranged. One email that I'm thinking of in particular, this woman said, I've been estranged from my sister for 3 years. I did not know how to open this conversation. And I read the book and it gave me a couple of ideas about how to do it. And now we've reconnected and it feels amazing, right? Or someone else who wrote in to say like he was going to ask his boss for a raise. And he thought the right way to do it was just to walk in and like sort of say, here's all the things that I've been contributing and I deserve this raise. And he said, and then I read the book and I realized I should probably start with a deep question, right? Ask him a question rather than just make a demand. And he ended up getting the raise. I think that all of us want to connect more with the people around us, right? Everybody on earth has tough conversations. There are conversations where you have to ask for a raise. You have to give someone negative feedback. You have to talk about a topic where maybe you and I disagree, like politics, or we have different experiences like race. Those are always hard conversations. But the truth of the matter is, we can make them a lot easier if we understand what to do before and during the conversation. That helps bring down the temperature, helps make everyone feel at ease, and most importantly, helps us understand what the other person is trying to say and helps us speak in a way that they can understand us in return.
And the stakes are high. We want to maintain these relationships. You don't want to harm a coworker. You don't want to have tension in a relationship with your partner. You don't want to lose a best friend. But it feels, especially now in the current environment, that the stakes are so high that people will turn their back on us because of a political view or an opinion or the way we see the world. And that's why I think these skills are so important. These tools, this ability to walk into these conversations and maintain the relationship, strengthen the relationship, that's the goal.
We've entered this weird phase, and this is something that AJ and I and our guests have been talking about for years now. Once we realized that normal life was in a transitional period and people were staying online more and doing working from home. And then of course, COVID expedited that transition. So now we find ourselves post-COVID with loneliness epidemics and people losing their social skills and now thinking about communication in a more deliberate manner because they understand, well, this is how I connect with people. This is the thing that's going to make me less lonely. But because now it is something they have to do, it becomes like losing weight. Well, sure, I know how to lose weight. I can go down to the gym. I can quit eating so much, but then I got to get up early and then I got to get some gym clothes and then, forget about it. And we're seeing that with loneliness now and I'm talking to people every day on my calls and I hear it of I'm now lonely. I've never felt like this before. Or now that I work from home, I'm losing out on the connection I used to have just from going into the office. And everybody knows it's an issue. Everybody knows what they have to do about it. And then it's getting, well, are you going to commit to fixing this and expediting this process and getting and connected and happy again? Or are you going to continue to be in a liminal transition until something happens?
What's a conversation for you that's been tough recently, or one that you found yourself shying away from because it just seems like it's too big or it's just going to be too hard?
I had a very recent one with a new landlord. So, obviously you sign a lease, you're excited about a place, you want to have a great relationship with them. And something happened on the move in that is kind of like a deal breaker for us. And in that conversation, I had to basically, I'm managing the relationship, right? It's like we love the place, but this is a real issue. We need to get this handled. And you don't want to set off that relationship on the wrong foot by just seeming like you're really negative or you're looking for problems or you're going to be a difficult tenant. But at the same time, this is important to us. So that balance is what I was saying. The stakes are higher than ever with this relationship. And we've had on the Harvard happiness study scientists to tell us exactly that, these relationships lead to longevity and happiness. Everyone's aware of that now. They've seen the social media clips, but it feels this tension of like losing relationships, as Johnny's talking about, and feeling more lonely, like a sense of dread.
It's terrible. So can I ask you, when you were talking to your landlord, how did you start that conversation? Because I imagine you sort of have that knot in your stomach and I'm about to say something that this guy isn't going to like to hear. How did you start it?
Yeah, well, I'll practice it a little bit back and forth with my wife first, and recognize that, our new landlord was literally traveling. So we're staying in her place while she's in Europe, and we kind of do the same thing. We travel quite a bit. So it's like, hey, happy to hear you landed safely. Really focus on what's going on with her, and then recognizing, unfortunately, this happened on the move-in. This is a big issue for us that is potentially a deal breaker. I know we don't want to start off, our stay on this foot, but we do need to take this seriously and get it handled. So exactly, like recognizing that she's in transit, what's going on with her, trying again to be cordial before launching into, I need this thing from you and it's really important and it could break our relationship. That's how I did it.
And what I love about this is two things. First of all, that you practiced it with your wife, right? One of the things that we know about tough conversations is they're a lot easier to have if we just sort of give them a little bit of thought before we have them. And sometimes that means practicing them with our spouses or friends. Sometimes it means just in the car, just thinking like, okay, here's what I want to say, but what am I hoping the other person says, right? What question can I ask the other person that's going to make this conversation easier for both of us? So preparation matters a lot. And there's a couple of things that we can do in preparation that really help. But then the next thing is that you started by not just jumping in and demanding something, right? But by showing her, okay, I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about the fact that you're traveling, you're in transition right now. This thing happened and it's a pain in the butt, but it's probably a pain in the butt for you as well. Like, it's not like you wanted this to happen. It's something that just emerged. So let me just say, and what you did next is you probably stated what your goal was. And this is really important in conversations, is that most conversations are helped if we say what we're seeking in that conversation. So my guess is you said something, tell me if I'm getting this wrong. You said something like, look, there's this issue that I want to talk to you about. And my hope is that we can resolve it really easily, right? Not I'm right and you're wrong and I need you to fix this. But my goal is that we can resolve this easily for both of us. And when you do that, when you say what your goal is, like if an employee comes in, you have to give them negative feedback and you say, look, my goal in this conversation is for you to be the best employee you can be, because I really want you to be working at 100%. When we say our goal, what we're doing is we're inviting the other person to get on the same side of the table with us. Rather than me versus you, it's the two of us together trying to pursue this goal. And we might have different perspectives on how to get there. We might not completely agree or like what the other person says, but we are shoulder to shoulder because we're trying to achieve that goal together.
And the best part of that, you're opening the doors to hear their perspective. And if you're having that conversation, you probably haven't seen a clear path and need to get their input. Opens up the idea, the floor for them to answer that question that you've been pondering.
That's exactly right.
And when that happens, you're like, well, I can't believe I was sweating this out. And not all conversations are going to go that way, but you want to at least give it the opportunity to do that.
And those questions are really important, right? And I think last time we talked a little bit about deep questions.
Yep.
These questions that ask you about your values or your beliefs or your experiences. And it can sound really intimidating to do that, but it's like if you meet a lawyer, instead of saying, what law firm do you work at? You can ask them, oh, what made you decide to become a lawyer? Right? That second question, it invites the person to tell you so much. When you're talking to your new landlord, oh, I'm just wondering, what's the travel been like? Like, has it been tough? Has it been okay? Like, are you having a good time? Are you enjoying yourself in that place? What I'm doing is I'm inviting you to tell me about who you are, about your experiences, about what sort of motivates you to be the person who you are. And we tend to think of it as small talk, but it's not really small talk, right? Not if we do it right. If we ask a deep question, if we ask someone how they feel about the world rather than the facts of the world, then what we're doing is we're giving them space in that conversation to make themselves known. And that's at the core of connecting, even when we disagree with each other.
Those questions also bring up another entry point as well to connection. Because let's just say that there is a problem that you're working out. You want to find out at what conscious level they're viewing that problem. For a lot of people, they don't realize how their values, how their emotions are attached to their motivations, are attached to their values, are attached to that worldview. And they might not be conscious of their values. And if they're not conscious of their values, it's likely that they're not conscious of their worldview either, but they are in touch with their emotions. They said it, and that's your entry point for you to explore with them. And
It's
then
incredibly
if they're connected with their values, well, then now you have your entry path into chatting with their values. And when you meet them where they are, that's when you're elevating conversation. That creates impact with people. And again, that's your entry to influence, to lead, to connect your high intention communication.
AJ, when you sent that email to your new landlord, what did they reply with? What did they say in the reply?
It was a phone conversation. So she gave me a WhatsApp call knowing that we had to talk, said, listen, I'm going to be traveling, but I want to hear how the move-in goes, and had some information to share with us around how the garbage is handled and some codes that we didn't get when we moved in, just based on her travel. So I knew it was going to be a conversation. I didn't know when she was going to be calling. And obviously there's a lot of tension there. As I said, you want a great relationship. We were excited about the place, excited when we had the walkthrough with her, got to know a bit more of her values, which are being European and traveling and staying in the States. And we love, as Americans, traveling and staying in Europe. So felt there's a lot of value overmatch there. And I was like, hey, I want to maintain this relationship. I've had terrible relationships with landlords over the years, so I know how bad things can get. You don't want that to be where you're starting your relationship.
And how did she respond? What did she do when you said, look, this thing happened, this is why it's a big deal for us, and I hope it's a big deal for you. How did she respond?
One thing, again, we didn't get into this, but what I picked up on from our walkthrough together was that she's also very health conscious. And I started off by saying, this situation is actually really important to my wife and I and our infant's health. So tying it directly to a value that is shared, knowing that we'd want to work to a resolution around this, and knowing that if she was feeling the same way, she would be having the same conversation with me.
And what I love about that is that what you're doing there is not only are you speaking in her language, right? You're bringing up a topic that is important to her, that corresponds with her values. You're also proving to her that you've listened to her before, right? The fact that she's health conscious, that this is something that you're reflecting back at her. What you're doing is you're proving, I paid attention to who you are. I paid attention. I care about who you are. And one of the things that we know about social reciprocity is that if you believe that I am listening to you, you become much more likely to listen to me in return. We tend to think of listening as this passive activity, right? Where we close our mouth and we open our ears. And that's the first step, but that's not sufficient on its own for important conversations. Once you listen, you have to prove to the person that you're listening by oftentimes repeating what they've said in your own words. Look, I know health is really, really important to you. You mentioned to me that you had problems with asthma. I just want you to know that I totally hear that. And the reason why I'm calling you today is because health is important to us as well. And then when we do that, when we repeat back in our own words what we heard them say, what's really powerful is if we take a break and we ask them if we got it right. Did I hear you correctly? Because in that moment, when we're asking that person, did I hear you correctly? What we're really doing is we're saying, hey, do I have your permission to acknowledge that I'm listening really closely to you? Because inevitably they're going to say yes, or they're going to tell you, no, you didn't hear me correctly. Let me tell you what it is. And when they give you that permission to acknowledge that you were listening, that's when they become much more likely to listen in response.
What's key there, I think many of us don't want to get it wrong, so we avoid saying, did I get that right? because you feel this tension of what if they say no? But actually
Right.
the clarification
It's so
creates
good.
connection too. And I think that's
Absolutely.
something that's missed on a lot of people. Like, you want to be on the same page. And if you got something wrong, you don't want to keep going down that path on a second date with a coworker, with your boss, even worse. You want the clarification to be on the same page. And it's okay if you get it wrong in what you thought you were hearing or what you thought you were perceiving.
And that clarification really, like, because sometimes we do get it wrong, right? Sometimes my wife tells me something and I say, okay, look, here's what I heard you say. Am I getting this right? And she's like, no, you didn't understand me at all. It's not that I care about this. It's that I care about that. And it's actually great for both of us because A, I was actually misunderstanding and now I understand a little bit better. B, she feels like she's finally getting me to understand what she's trying to tell me. This act, they call it looping for understanding, right? The step 1 is to ask a deep question. Step 2 is to repeat back in your own words. Step 3 is to ask if you got it right. The reason why looping is so powerful, and researchers have found that it's the most powerful way to diffuse tensions, particularly in workplace settings, is because if the goal of a conversation is not for you and I to agree with each other, the goal of a conversation is for me to understand what you're trying to tell me and for me to speak in a way that you can understand me. And as long as we understand each other, even if we walk away completely disagreeing with each other, completely thinking each other's wrong, we're still going to feel connected to each other. And that connection is going to help us navigate our relationship even when we disagree.
And you don't want to be solving the wrong problem for your wife. You don't want to be worried about the wrong thing. And I've been there where it's like, I'll go charging ahead because I want to solve something. And then I get to the solution, check back in, and my wife's like, that wasn't my problem at all. And now I just wasted all this time. I ticked her off even more because I could have been using that time on something else. And the other point I want to make, because we hear this all the time and we share this in our programs, we listen with our eyes and our ears. So when I was doing the tour of our new place, I saw all the signs in the place around her health. I saw the advanced water filtration system. I saw the Peloton in the garage. It wasn't that she was coming out and saying, I exercise 4 times a week and I'm an avid X, Y, and Z. I was listening through watching what's going on around me. And we're listening through body language and these cues. And I know so many of us, when we think about listening, we're like, oh, I just got to tune into the words. I just got to pick up on what's saying, close my eyes, open my ears. But it's more than that.
It's actually an interesting point because we know that about anywhere from 40 to 60% of communication is nonverbal, or I'll say non-linguistic, because sometimes we make noises that are verbal, but they're not words, right? We go, or right? All these different gestures and noises that we can make, the expressions on our face, all of these are part of how we communicate. And what's interesting is, as Johnny pointed out, we're now at this time when so many people are communicating digitally, right? When we have meetings online, we have meetings via Zoom, we might do telephone calls. It's easy for us to think that we don't know how to communicate non-verbally in those settings. But the truth is that people who pay attention to communication, they find that it's just as important. You know, when you're on the telephone, all of us tend to over enunciate our words by about 30%. We try and display our emotions in our voice rather than on our face when we're on the telephone. And none of us are really aware that we're doing this, right? This almost happens at a subconscious level. But it's because we've been using phones our entire life. And we know that if they can't see our face, we need to somehow convey to them what we're feeling. And so we automatically put that emotion into our voice. We can use this non-linguistic communication in any setting. It's just a matter of thinking about it and reminding yourself that, like, you know, sending an email is a little bit different from sending a text, is different from giving someone a phone call. There's slightly different rules, and we need to abide by those.
We tend to pay less attention to these signals as we get older, and NASA is now testing for this exact reason.
What they're doing is they're looking for astronauts who have emotional intelligence. And what they found was that the way to test for that, there was no magic question they could ask. Because people who are, like, if you're in the final rounds of an astronaut interview, you're kind of amazing, right? You're like, you have 2 PhDs, you fly fighter jets, you're usually like super handsome or beautiful. Like, most importantly, you've been doing interviews your entire life. You know how to fake emotional intelligence better than anyone else. And so a lot of these guys, they could fake emotional intelligence and they would get hired as astronauts, and NASA would send them up to space for 6 or 12 months at a time. And the thing is, you can't fake emotional intelligence for 6 months, right? They would drive each other crazy or drive other people crazy. And so one of the researchers, the psychologist, the chief psychologist for manned spaceflight at NASA, he developed this technique. What he would do is he would walk into the interview room and he would spill all these papers on the floor. And then he would laugh as if on accident, but he'd done it on purpose. And then he would laugh this big boisterous laugh and go, ha, 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 I cannot believe I did that. And then he would study how the person reacted. Because everyone reacted in one of two ways. Some people were like, oh, I'm sorry that happened. That's really silly. Let me give you a hand. And some people would laugh that same boisterous laugh. Oh, that's so silly. I can't believe that happened. Let me give you a hand. Some of the people were matching the intensity of his response because what they were doing is they know what's going on, right? They know that this guy made a mistake and then he compounded the mistake by overreacting to it. And they want to make him feel at ease. So they overreact as well. That's how we figure out who has emotional intelligence, is the people who pay attention to us, who show that they're listening to us, who match us. They're the ones who understand us and want to hear what we have to say.
I think, unfortunately, we're oftentimes trying to get to our own point and rush ahead to the things that we've prepared to say. So looping back to my conversation, I knew that if, maybe she had a terrible trip to Europe and lost her luggage and a lot of other stressful things on her, I wasn't going to just launch into, hey, I had this other really stressful thing that's a deal breaker. I wanted to check in. It
matters a lot. There's this guy, Nick Epley, who's a professor at the University of Chicago. And for a lot of time, we talk about perspective taking, right? That if you want to communicate with someone, you should walk a mile in their shoes and really understand how they see the world. It turns out, though, that humans are very, very bad at perspective taking. If I told you, imagine what it's like to be living in Gaza right now, you might be, or imagine what it's like to be living in Israel, or imagine what it's like to be living in Russia. You think you can kind of put yourself in that person's head, but it turns out not very much, right? Because their experiences are so different. So what's much better than perspective taking is what Nick Epley calls perspective getting. Ask deep questions and then listen to what the person says, and they will tell you their perspective, right? How was your trip? It was I thought it was going to be easy and it's so miserable and I'm totally jet lagged now and they lost my luggage. Okay, instead of just assuming you're on vacation and you're having a great time, now what I'm hearing from you in this perspective getting is you're telling me you're actually super frustrated too. You know what these frustrations are like. You don't want someone calling up and being like, here's a problem, deal with it right now. It's really powerful to be able to ask those questions and get that perspective.
And recognize that you, again, can get it wrong. And I think that's where the looping comes back in. We've talked about the Fast Friends framework, and I think for a lot of people, it sounds good. I just ask a series of questions, and all of a sudden, I'm in a deep connection with someone. It works at a lab. Let's talk about reading these cues in an actual conversation with someone where maybe you can't get through all of those questions, or you are pressed for time. I know every one of us, as we talked about earlier with the loneliness epidemic, are trying to build deeper connections. What should we be doing once we're getting these answers, and how do we know we've gone too deep, too fast? What are the cues here?
So a couple of things, 3 things in particular. Number 1, ask the deep question, right? And then again, the deep question, it doesn't have to be tell me about your mother, or hey, are you sad right now? The deep question can be as simple as, oh, you live in the Heights? What do you like about the Heights? Why'd you move up there? Or it could be as big as, oh, I'm sorry to hear that you were at a funeral. Was it someone who mattered to you a lot? The reason why those are deep questions is because they ask people to tell us who they are. But also, it's important to note they're invitations. They're not mandates. If I say to you, oh, who died? It's a mandate. You have to tell me. But if I say, oh, was it someone important to you? It gives them the option to say, yeah, it was someone who's important. But, this happens, right? Clearly, they don't want to talk about it. Or to say, yeah, it was my favorite aunt. I loved her so much, and I'm so sad that she's gone. So we want to ask a deep question in a way that invites the other person to share who they are. It doesn't have to be a big question. Just has to be something that asks them how they feel about life rather than the facts of their life. Number 2 is we do want, if it's an important conversation, we want to state what our goal is. And our goal might be just as simple as being hey, I just wanted to hang out with you guys for a couple of hours because I hadn't seen you in a little bit, right? So I'm saying my goal is just to catch up. I don't have any other agenda. Or it might be that my goal is, hey, I wanted to talk to you about this project because I feel like we've got a little bit of tension. And I think if we can figure out how to work through that tension, we're actually going to be a stronger team together. Okay, now I know your goal. Your goal is not to tell me I'm doing something wrong. Your goal is for us to come together and figure out how to do this. So ask a deep question, number one. Declare your intention, number two, at the beginning. And then number three, go ahead and say if there's something that's on your mind that makes this conversation harder. There was this really interesting study that was done about people talking about race. This researcher brought together friends who were black and white, and she asked them to talk about race. And for many of these folks, they had been friends for years and they had never really talked about race. And she divided them into two groups. And she told one group, okay, look, before you have this conversation, I want you to do something. I want you to just acknowledge it's going to be awkward, right? Say something like, I want to talk about race. This is going to be super awkward. And I might say the wrong thing. Like sometimes my lips move faster than my brain. And what I mean might come out wrong. And I hope that you don't get offended. And I promise if the same thing happens to you, I will not get offended. Right. But then declare your goal, why you want to have this conversation. But it's really important to me to talk about this because I know it's something that's part of your life. And I really feel our friendship really matters to me. I want to understand more about you. When people do that, it diffuses the tension in that conversation by about 80%. And so you ask a deep question, you state your goal, you acknowledge anything at the outset that might be uncomfortable or might kind of where your head's at, invite them to tell you about where their head's at. If you do those three things, even if you're talking to someone who you completely disagree with, even if you're talking to your crazy uncle, you're going to do okay. You're going to walk away from that conversation feeling like you both genuinely heard each other and that you feel connected.
You're right. Discomfort is useful. Owning the discomfort is a big part of this here, and recognizing it allows the other person to own it and feel more comfortable in the discomfort that's happening.
Think back over the last year. What's the best conversation you've had in the last year?
Okay.
Does one come to mind? Tell me a little bit about it.
It was a catch up with an old high school friend that I hadn't seen in 20 years now.
20 years. That's a long time. And my guess is that the beginning of it was kind of awkward, right? It's like, hey, I can't remember your wife's name. And it's been 20 years since we talked to each other, right? Did you call him or did he call you? What was the genesis of that?
I was actually just randomly next to him. So.
Oh, really?
Was visiting, but not our hometown. Just again.
Oh my gosh.
World's a small place. And we ran into each other in person.
That's awesome. How long did you talk for?
I don't even know. It started, I obviously thought it was just going to be a few moments and went on for probably close to an hour.
And if I had said to you, you should call this guy, you haven't talked to him in 20 years, you should pick up the phone and call him. You'd be like, I don't want to call this guy, right? This is going to be miserable. It's been too long. There's just too much to catch up on. And yet you enjoyed that conversation so much. And this gets at this other thing. You mentioned the Harvard happiness study. One of the things that we know from that study, what was originally known as the Grant study and is now known as the Harvard study of adult happiness or adult development, is that the people who are happiest are the ones who maintain relationships. And that does not mean that they talk to people on a regular basis. It doesn't mean that they talk to people weekly or even monthly. It means that ever so often they talk to someone who they've been out of touch with. And in doing so, they reify that relationship. And guaranteed, the first couple of minutes are always going to be awkward. Hey, Jim, it's been 5 years since we've spoken to each other. How are your kids? You got 2 kids, 3 kids, 5 kids? I can't remember, right? But after you get through that, you are going to enjoy talking to each other so much. It's going to make you feel good. It's going to make you feel better. So that's it. One interesting thing is that it makes you happier. The other interesting thing is that it makes you more successful. There's a guy named Gansevetter who's a really famous psychology experimenter. And he tried to figure out how people found the jobs that they're in. And what he found is that when someone gets a new job, it's usually not because of what's known as a strong tie. It's usually not a close friend who helped them get that job. Because oftentimes your close friends already work with you, right? You work alongside them. You see them every single day. If there's an opportunity that comes up, you know about that opportunity. You guys are watching the same shows and reading the same magazines. The way that we find new jobs is because of what are known as loose ties. People who are distant friends or friend of a friend. Because in doing so, what happens is that oftentimes they see opportunities that we're not aware of. They see opportunities for us that never occurred to us. That's how we become successful. And when we become successful, that's how we end up becoming the people we want to be.
That discomfort that we're talking about here, you're both feeling it, but you're also feeling disconnected. And the connection piece is far more important than the discomfort of the first few moments or first few minutes of the conversation.
And it feels really, really good. It just feels amazing to get a chance to connect with someone, particularly if there's someone who's important to you who you haven't talked to in a long time.
Having those opportunities, those organic opportunities, obviously it frames the conversation in a new way where people are much more relaxed, right? Whereas if I'm like, hey, I want to talk to my high school buddy, here's my Calendly, book a call with me, right? Because that's what I do now because I'm so used to doing it for work. So it's like you said this, and I don't even know, like, does everyone do that now, or are my regular friends going, "Why'd you send me a Calendly link for a time
I don't
call?"
think it's I don't think it's the link that matters. I think it's how you present it, right? Like, because norms change about when someone sends me a Calendly, I don't even know how you say it. It's kind of nice, right? Because it lets me, instead of doing like the back and forth,
right?
But the context should be, I really want to reconnect with you. I've got there's like a bunch of dates where I could do it. I put them into this thing so that you can find one that works for you really well, right? So again, I'm stating my intention there. I'm stating my goal, as opposed to just being like, hey, here's my link. Like, just find a time. I'm sure we can chat at some point.
What do we do in those situations where we feel like someone's just not listening to us as much as we're trying to be a super communicator?
The truth of the matter is, oftentimes, look, you can't force someone to do something they don't want to, right? Like when I talk to my kids, there are times that they just do not want to listen to me. And it doesn't matter what I do, right? There's no conversational trick that can work its magic. But let's assume that it's a situation where there is at least a glimmer of the possibility that you do want to connect with each other. You do want to communicate with each other, which is actually what happens with my kids, right? The number one thing you can do is start that conversation by proving to them that you want to listen to them. I become more likely to listen to you when I believe that you are listening to me. And so one of the best things is this thing called callbacks. There was actually a study that was done at Harvard Business School of speed daters. And they tried to figure out like who gets, the whole point of a speed date is you like talk to each other for a minute or two, and then you get to say who you want to have a real date with afterwards. And so they're trying to figure out who got the most requests for real dates. And they initially thought maybe it's like the most handsome or beautiful men or women. Maybe it's the ones who are the most interesting or have the doing or have the highest education or the highest paycheck. None of that mattered. The only thing that mattered in determining whether you were successful at speed dating was if you asked questions and did this thing called callbacks. Oh, it's interesting that you like to go to Peru, because I remember at the beginning of the conversation, you said that your family is from South America. All right, do you have family in Peru? Is that why you like to go there? So what I'm doing there is I'm proving to you that I'm listening to you. And if you start a tough conversation with someone, hey, when I talk to my kids, hey, I want to talk to you because 2 weeks ago you told me that it was really important to you that you get good grades this year. And I've been noticing that it's been harder to get you to do your homework at night. So tell me a little bit about why you think that is and what we can do to help you get the grades that you told me you wanted to get. Right? What I'm doing there is I'm proving that I'm paying attention. I'm proving that I'm listening. I'm showing him that our goal is the same. Our goal is for him to get good grades. And it really matters.
We all want to feel heard and important to someone else. So it makes sense that the callback would be so effective. Even a callback with a distant friend you haven't talked to is going to put them back in that nostalgia, feel good.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
do you remember that time when we were in high school? Yeah. Yeah. It feels good to be heard. We all want to be heard and seen. And when we facilitate that, when we help someone know that they've been heard and seen, it really helps them become the person that they most esteem about themselves.
As we wrap, I'd love to hear what you're working on, because part of being a super communicator is recognizing that these are tools that atrophy and we continue to work on them to get better.
I write for the New Yorker magazine, and I think my next book is going to be about AI. And so I've been spending a lot of time looking at how technology changes how we communicate in ways that are both good and bad. And one of the things that I'm realizing is that we tend to learn how to communicate in a kind of uneven way, right? We might learn really quickly at first, and then there's a big valley, and then we learn a little bit more. And so one of the things I'm trying to figure out is, as AI becomes more popular, as it influences more people's lives, how do we make sure that it remains a force for good, something that helps us communicate rather than removes our ability to communicate? And a big part of that, I think, is my own personal goal is I try and ask one deep question a day that to someone who's kind of unexpected that I would ask them a deep question, whether it's a stranger that I see on the street or like my barista, or it's someone that I work with. Those deep questions are what connect us. And so I try and ask those, and then and then oftentimes I'm asking them about AI. How do you use AI? What does it represent for you? Trying to understand how our communication will shift.
Well, we're excited for the next book on AI. Where can our audience find out about your paperback?
The paperback comes out this month of Supercommunicators, and you can find it in Amazon or bookshop.org or your local bookstore, which is great to support your local bookstore. And you can find me online. I have a newsletter called The Science of Better. I'm just at charlesduhigg.com, Duhigg.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.